So, and again, he justified it in his hearings with them when they were reviewing his license and determining whether he was going to be disbarred, that he justified it by saying, well, they're criminals, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
easy to get rid of him.
yeah, yeah, you
He
were
still
very
owes me
fortunate.
$89,000.
Yeah, I know. I worked with Jose on that to try to get that back, and you know, Jose was kind of lackluster about it. I think attorneys going up against other attorneys is not, it's kind of taboo. So, and it doesn't
Well,
matter if they're disbarred. And then Jose
no.
had his own legal issues. So,
Well, the lawyer's fund who I went through was actually corrupt, if you ask me too, because I had all the paperwork. I had it with my fiance at that time. I think we were married by then, and so uh, we what do you call? We put all the paperwork together. She kept all the photocopies of the canceled checks I gave him, all the letters he wrote. There was the proof that they needed was more than enough to give me back my money. But because I was, a crook, criminal, like, they talk to the FBI. The FBI says do whatever you can not to pay them. I know that, and so there it is. They kept trying to retry me all the time.
yeah, I read some of those decisions, and their decision was based on the testimony of the prosecution, which
Mhm.
was disproved in court at your trial. It was proved to be false, and they still used that or those arguments. Um, I remember, so there was a point in I'm not sure if it was in the pretrial, but where the prosecution was stating that you were planning to kidnap Sam's kid,
Oh,
and I
yeah,
passed a note. I remember passing a note to Jose saying the kid is Joe's age. He's not a kid. It's a slang term. It's not, and he had to stand up because when the court heard that, everybody kind of went, oh my
well,
God, that's horrible. And I was like, you got to clarify this now because that's going to sit with them that he was going to kidnap a child,
Well,
you
I
know?
was in my 40s. His son was, I think, 30s. Like he was younger than me, but he was in his 30s. But that's the kind of way I spoke. I said the guy said this kid, that's just this slang street talk. That's all it is.
Right. But Jose was not
Yeah.
aware of that, the term, using that terminology, that slang talk.
Hmm.
And I remember passing him a note and saying, that it's a kid. When he says kid, he's talking about a grown man. He's not talking about a child because they were so appalled at the thought of you kidnapping a child that it
Right.
shaded their whole perception of you. And
It
so I
did.
was like, you got to clarify this and tell them, it's a grown man, it's slang. And then they all kind of breathed a sigh of relief because they wanted to
Yeah.
like you. They wanted to be on your side. They wanted to, support the, you captivated the jury and the judge and any spectator in there. When they put Mike Brooks on the stand, I remember a reporter from the New York Daily News said to me, when he left the courtroom, we're all safer now that he's gone. That was their key witness. And
I know.
he should have been a witness for us. I remember at some point, Jose sent me a correspondence from them. It was a scanned letter, I guess, or one of your 302s that you had
Okay.
reported 10 years prior about Tony Polero. And
Mhm.
then he made a note on it. He's going to do it at his own. Joe's going to do this at his own discretion. He didn't use your name, obviously,
Mhm.
but he said he's going to decide at his own discretion whether this is a legitimate thing or not, because there was, he had talked to you at that time about a murder for hire, and so
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
good point.
when John Sachs submitted that to the defense, we were laughing because we're like, is he arguing our case for us? Because it was, I'm going to use, it was bullshit then and it's bullshit now, you know?
Well, what
So,
happened was, don't forget, I think John Zach and there was another guy, Ken Polite.
yeah,
They took care. They Yes, they came after Miriam Roker. Miriam Roker is one of the she was evil. okay, and she still came
Oh
to the
yeah.
courtroom. Yeah, and she was kinda dictating to 'em what they do, but they knew they were doing something wrong because I had asked Agent Gator he was the FBI one of the head the leading on this on the thing, and I said, let me ask you a question. I said I saved the judge's life, I saved the USA's life, Greg Andreas, Judge Garifas. I says that doesn't mean anything to you. I don't get a pass, and he just shook his head like nope. He didn't even care about his own.
Nope. No, they
Yep.
don't. They, like I said, their whole thing is to keep their numbers up. I think I don't know if it's still the same because I haven't checked it in a long time, but I think they had a 95% conviction rate. Well, it's easy to convict people when you have them plead out. They plead,
Right.
because they're afraid or they can't afford to fight. That's one thing. And I can tell you in the cases that I've had against the FBI where they have wrongly accused somebody of a crime, we have won all of those cases because
Mm,
if you have the money to fight and the fortitude to do it, you can prove what they're doing is corrupt. And it's just a matter of being able to do that and having the minds. We had a great legal team. We had a lot of, very smart people working to get you out of that mess. And what it came down to was that looking at the details, the timelines of things didn't add up. But Mike Cooks had submitted the video that he took of the
yeah,
place where he was supposed to go. And in the video, in his testimony, he said it was cold and there was snow on the ground and all of this. But in the video, there were leaves on the trees and it was in Connecticut. There's no way there were leaves on the trees and snow on the ground at the same time. It was
that's
very
right.
green and sunny and whatever. That's how long they didn't want. That's the disparaging timeline that they presented because he went in the summer and then and they weren't the two leaves weren't even turning. He went in the summer, but they didn't arrest you until January. So
That's
they
right.
couldn't justify the urgency in not having the warrants, and they couldn't if they had told the truth. And I had also passed a note to Jose about that. I don't think it came up, but it was a huge point to make that there was no urgency because the whole conversation was dead. It wasn't even an issue.
Right.
By the time that they arrested you, it was already months past, several months past.
Oh,
So there
easy.
was no,
Yeah.
yeah. Mike Cooks was a notorious for using the NYPD as an ATM. He would,
But that came
you
out in
know,
trial too.
yeah, and he didn't care. Jose was great when he asked him about uh, the money that the FBI was giving him. They were giving him money every month to keep him under wraps. And
Mhm.
then, he was also collecting welfare at the time. And Jose was like, well, did you report? No, it's none of their business. Did you report it to them that you had income? And he's like, it's none of their business.
W
Oh, he
he
was a
al
winner.
Yeah, no, he also said that he says, I don't want them in my business." What about the guy he shot? And he shot him in the butt, and the guy had to use a bag to go to the bathroom. He said, "Did you help the guy? Did you" and all of that stuff too, and he said, "Nah." He says, "I don't I didn't care what happened to him." You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, he was a great witness for the defense. He really
Oh,
was
without a
because
doubt.
he was so abrasive. His personality was horrible, and he was just a thug. And like I said, that reporter from the Daily News, I don't remember who it was,
Mm.
um, but he just, everybody was just like, or even easier after he left the courtroom. That's for sure.
Without a doubt. Yeah, people were scared of him. Even the marshal said to me, "What are you doing hanging around a guy like that?" But I used him in a lot of ways to just build up my street cred to keep that, I was hanging around because listen, he's a legitimate tough guy in his own right too. But when he
Yeah,
did testify for me, I couldn't believe when he was telling the truth up there. I said, 90% of his testimony was for
the
me.
defense.
And I couldn't
Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Wow." Uh, you
Oh,
know,
you could see the prosecution sinking down in their seats. If, oh my God, I can't believe we put this guy on the stand. But they didn't never expect you to go to trial either. They never expected
no.
you to take the defensive stand that you took, where you were
Well,
authorized to do what you were doing. So they never expected that. And it was crystal clear in your 302s. Vinny Prizzuti had made a point to list out all of the crimes and criminal activity that you could discuss with from criminals in order to gain information. And he even put that he couldn't list them all there. He wrote that in his 302 for you.
yeah.
that he couldn't even list all of the crimes that you were, and any other, it was just like any other crimes that you could possibly think of. He's
Mhm.
authorized to discuss these things. So, I mean, there were so many damning pieces of evidence against the prosecution's case with the suppression hearing. The illegal search and seizure. They had no business being in your house. There was absolutely no reason. The judge said that too. You could have just arrested him in the driveway if it was such an urgent need, but they had no warrants.
Yep.
There was absolutely no cause for what they did, with the exception of personal gain.
And if I don't mind, if you don't mind, I want to also tell everybody I'm gonna put that that my that the testimony and everything like that. I'm going to put that on my Patreon channels for people to view from themselves if they want to look at it, because it's worth the read, especially since it's in the law books now. And I also want to touch on the fact that how the prosecution, how they didn't want, how the assistant U.S. attorneys and everything, when they were talking to Mike Cooks, and how they were sinking low in the seat. This is the FBI themselves, when it says the United States of America against Joe Barone. What did I do to
Yeah,
America? I'm one
yeah,
guy.
that, yeah. Uh, well, that's a standard in the courts. Obviously, that there are a lot of things about, and just to clarify, I'm not a lawyer. I just want to be clear. I worked on the team. I helped with the
Mm,
research. I helped with the arguments, those types of things. But I want to be clear, I'm not a lawyer. So if my terminology is off, or if I'm, whatever, I'm not going to use whatever legal terms I know, and I'm not going to profess to be an attorney. But I just want to be clear that the things that they did were complete violations of the Constitution, of your
mhm,
civil rights. They violated you every way possible. And I know that their practice is to throw as much at the wall, as many charges at you as possible, and then see what sticks. Well, when you get a corrupt judge, we were very fortunate that we got Judge Buchwald, because
mhm.
she was a fair-minded judge. She was against you from the very beginning, until she saw your record, until things started to come out. I believe your fiance at the time was sending her faxes and messages and telling her constantly, like, because your attorney wasn't defending you. Roy Kolksar was not providing a
Well,
defense.
and neither did George Santangelo, but he was a wise guy. He represented a lot of wise guys. So what I did was I hired him, gave him 45,000 cash, and then I hired him because I wanted to keep up my persona that I was still a wise guy. I mean, I knew he was going to find out later on, and then of course, it was going to come out that I was uh, an informant for all those years. But I just figured for the first part, as long as I can get bail, then I think I could work with something. You know what I mean? But they totally went against that as well.
Well,
He
he
stole my
wasn't
money
going
too.
to. Yeah,
No,
he wasn't going to represent you once he found out that you had been a cooperating witness or
no.
CI for them. That his goal was to inform the mafia of what you had done, and also just to get your money. As I recall, he even sent people down to the prison to talk to you.
Hmm.
Is that
Um, it,
correct?
it was not George actually. Too George had talked to a guy named Patty Felsetti, who was like a concierge now in the Genovese crime family. And so when he came up to visit me, he said, "By the way, Patty Boy says to say hello." So that means, "F you." You know what I mean?